Chuck Norris. A name that doesn't just represent strength, but defines it. A name that became a global symbol of power, discipline, and unstoppable force. A legend whose presence alone reshaped action cinema and martial arts culture forever. But what if everything you thought you knew about Chuck Norris is only the surface of a story filled with silent pain, sacrifice, and a reality that becomes more emotional the deeper you look? Because at 85, the story of Chuck Norris is not just about power. It's about endurance in ways most people will never understand. The truth is, long before the fame, before the iconic roles, before the larger-than-life persona, there was a young boy growing up in a world that offered very little comfort and even less certainty. A childhood shaped not by strength, but by struggle. Not by confidence, but by doubt. And not by recognition, but by feeling invisible in a life that seemed to move forward without him. Growing up in a modest environment, he faced challenges that would have broken many, including a father who struggled with personal issues and a household that lacked stability, forcing him to grow up faster than he should have, forcing him to carry emotional weight before he even understood what it meant. And those early years didn't build a warrior overnight. They built someone searching for identity, searching for purpose, searching for something that could turn pain into power. And that search eventually led him to martial arts, not as a path to fame, but as a lifeline, as a way to take control in a world that often felt uncontrollable. And what started as a personal escape slowly became an obsession, a discipline that demanded everything from him, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Because mastery doesn't come without sacrifice, and every hour spent training was an hour spent pushing through pain, exhaustion, and self-doubt. But even as he began to rise in the martial arts world, earning titles and recognition, success didn't erase the struggles that came before it. It only added new pressures, new expectations, and new responsibilities that followed him everywhere. Becoming a champion sounds like the ultimate achievement, but behind the titles was a relentless demand to stay at the top, to keep winning, to never show weakness. And that kind of pressure doesn't just test your skills, it tests your identity. Because when your entire life becomes defined by being the best, the fear of losing becomes more than just a fear. It becomes a constant presence that never truly goes away. And then came Hollywood, a new world with new challenges, where physical strength alone wasn't enough, where he had to prove himself all over again in an industry that can be just as unforgiving as any competition ring. And breaking into acting wasn't a guaranteed success. It was another risk, another leap into the unknown. And while audiences would eventually embrace him as an action icon, the journey to that point was far from easy, filled with moments of doubt, rejection, and the constant pressure to live up to an image that was growing bigger than the man himself. His rise to fame brought recognition, wealth, and global admiration, but it also brought something far less visible, a level of expectation that can feel suffocating, because when the world sees you as invincible, it leaves no room for vulnerability, no space to acknowledge pain, and no opportunity to step back without being questioned. And as the years went on, that image of invincibility became both his greatest strength and his heaviest burden, because maintaining it required constant effort, constant performance, and constant sacrifice. And then came the moments that truly tested him, Not in front of cameras, but in real life. Moments that no amount of training or discipline could prepare him for, especially when it came to personal loss and family struggles. Because behind every public figure is a private life filled with challenges that rarely make headlines. One of the most painful chapters of his life came with the loss of loved ones, experiences that cut deeper than any physical injury, reminding him that no matter how strong you are, there are battles that cannot be fought or won. And perhaps one of the most defining challenges in his later years has been standing by his wife, Gina O'Kelly, through serious health struggles that changed their lives in ways they never expected, forcing him to step away from the spotlight at times, to prioritize something far more important than fame. And that decision, while deeply personal, reveals a side of Chuck Norris that the world doesn't often see, a side defined not by strength in combat, but by strength in compassion, loyalty, and resilience in the face of uncertainty. Caring for a loved one during difficult times is a challenge that requires a different kind of courage, a quieter, more enduring kind, one that doesn't seek recognition or applause, and yet it may be the most powerful display of strength of all. And as he navigated those challenges, the reality of aging added another layer to his journey. Because even legends are not immune to time. Even the strongest bodies begin to slow. And even the most disciplined minds must face the reality that certain things cannot be controlled forever. At 85, the expectations may have shifted, but they have not disappeared. Because when you've spent a lifetime being seen as unstoppable, the world doesn't easily adjust to seeing you as anything else. And that creates a unique kind of pressure, one that is difficult to explain, but impossible to ignore. The pressure to remain relevant, to maintain a legacy, to continue representing the image that millions of people have come to associate with your name. But behind that image is a human being who has experienced loss, sacrifice, and moments of doubt just like anyone else. And that's where the tragedy becomes most apparent, not in a single event, but in the accumulation of a lifetime of expectations, challenges, and sacrifices that rarely get acknowledged. Because while the world celebrates the legend, it often overlooks the man behind it. The man who had to navigate a difficult childhood, who had to fight for his place in the world, who had to carry the weight of an image that left little room for vulnerability, and who now, in his later years, continues to face challenges that require a strength far beyond physical power. And yet, through it all, he remains a symbol of resilience, not because his life was easy, but because he refused to let the difficulties define him completely. His story is not just about victories, it's about endurance, about the ability to keep moving forward even when the path is uncertain, even when the weight becomes heavy, and even when the world expects you to be something more than human. And that's what makes his journey so powerful and, at the same time, so heartbreaking. Because it reminds us that behind every legend is a story filled with moments that are far more complex than the image we see. Moments that reveal the true cost of becoming an icon. And at 85, that cost becomes impossible to ignore.